An intense sense of dread. One moment, one mistake, and hours, maybe even days of your life has been rendered meaningless. There's nothing you can do, nothing you can say, no redos, just failure. Doesn't that sound like fun?
Me.
No, not really. At least it never did to me. Or it didn't. Not until very recently. I'm going to be talking about a game mode some games have, where when your character dies, they die forever. No redos, no second lives, just game over. Hardcore mode, Iron Man runs, save wipes, and permadeath, these are the different names this game mode goes by. But why would anyone willingly choose to play them? Is it just bravado? Are gamers just trying to show how much of a hardcore gamer they are? Well, maybe that's a small part of it. But there are much more compelling reasons people play these game modes. However, there's something more important than why would they want to play it, and that's why would you? For the overwhelming majority of people, permadeath in a video game doesn't sound like fun. In fact, at best, it sounds like a fucking waste of time, and at worst, it feels like your cat taking a shit in your great game's ashes because you didn't clean out the litter box. What's worse is, depending on the game you're playing, it's not just a lack of skill that can get you killed either. There are things like broken connections, bugs, and unfair RNG that can end your playthrough, so why even bother? As someone who always hated the idea of hardcore game modes his entire life, I've found there's a lot more to them than I ever really gave them credit for. And I think, as someone who went from one extreme to another, I can shed some light on why even you, dear viewer, might want to play them. While most people might know what permadeath in a video game entails, that is, losing your character or save file forever when they die, the repercussions of a death aren't fully understood by most players. So, before anyone who doesn't already love this game mode can really consider playing it, I need to discuss why most people, and very likely you who's listening to this right now, doesn't fully grasp the game mechanic of permadeath in its entirety, for better or worse. Also, while there are many different names for these game modes, I will henceforth be referring to them collectively as hardcore, and game modes without permadeath as softcore for ease of understanding. So, to help you grasp this better, we'll be beginning with the most obvious and understandable reason why someone would misunderstand hardcore game modes, and that's because real life is kinda hardcore mode. I mean, well, sure, sometimes you can get a res. Most people are going to die exactly once, unless reincarnation is a thing. It's basically impossible to hear about permadeath in a video game and not on some level make the comparison between dying in a game and dying in real life. I know a lot of people are gonna hear me and think, yeah, obviously permadeath in a game is not the same as dying in real life. Why am I wasting my fucking time watching this terrible video? Well, first of all, calm down, alright? It's just a video. Secondly, as obvious as the differences may be, I want to compare the two, because the differences are not immediately obvious at first glance. When you're playing a game on hardcore and the character you're playing dies, that's it for them. If you want to continue, you have to restart again from the beginning, which leads to the logical conclusion that it would be like starting from the beginning all over again. This isn't exactly right though. Let's use reincarnation as an example to help explain. So let's say you die right now. And then are reincarnated as yourself back when you were born. You'd have to do everything over again. You'd have to go through diapers, your childhood, getting bullied again at school, all the girls thinking you're ugly, everyone in school making fun of you about how gross you are and picking on you, everyone taking your work and ripping it up, even your friends don't like you, no one ever likes you, all the awkward moments, the anger management classes, the ripped pants, stained clothes. What the fuck was that all about? Anyway, that's not how it works in hardcore mode, I hope not at least. First, you already know how to play the game, so instead of learning which button does what and where the pointy end of the stick goes, you hit the ground running. So it's like that thought experiment you do when you imagine being born as a child and knowing everything you do now. Sure, you might get bullied like crazy again, but this time you'll be investing into Bitcoin when it's only 12 cents, and instead of years of therapy, you'll have a crippling drug addiction. In fact, it's even better than that, because we're talking about starting at the beginning of a video game, and not just any video game. This is a game you chose to play the hardcore mode for, so you probably like it. So relating it back to real life, it's not like starting life right before you shit your pants drunk in a Denny's parking lot. It's more like starting right before a nice vacation, or maybe right before you find your soulmate, which, sure, for some people might also be right after shitting your pants drunk in a Denny's parking lot, but not everyone has the swagger my father does, all right? And while starting in a slightly better position than starting with absolutely nothing might not sound appealing yet, remember, this is only the first misunderstanding. The next reason why people have a bad opinion on hardcore actually has more to do with softcore than it does hardcore. When you think of hardcore without ever having played hardcore, all you can do is take your past experience playing softcore and assume that any of the times you died, your game would have ended if it had been hardcore. Which is logical, again, because as far as you know, that is where your game would have ended. And while that's technically right, it's also a very misleading technicality. That's because you play the two differently. In softcore, you roll up to a cliff, never having encountered one before. There's a good chance you're going to jump off of it to see if there's fall damage. That's the way virtually everyone finds out in a game if there is fall damage. I mean, why wouldn't you? It's faster than pulling out your phone and looking it up, and what are you going to lose? Maybe a few seconds? The thing is, if the game was hardcore, you'd lose a lot more than a few seconds, and you're pretty smart. Most of the time. Are you really going to test out if there's fall damage like that on a character with 10 plus hours where one death means the character is gone forever? No. Well, it's not impossible. But it is unlikely. What you would likely do is the thing that the minority of the population does, and just look it up. It takes only a couple of seconds more than jumping off the cliff. So again, if you play softcore and think, if it was hardcore, I would have lost my character when I jumped off, then while you would be technically right, if that's how you find out if there's fall damage in a hardcore game, then natural selection's been slacking a bit, all right? So when you're playing games with repercussions, you will often do a subconscious assessment of risk before jumping into an area where death is extremely likely. But most of the time, the cost of jumping in is negligible. Sure, you don't want to die, but what's the alternative? Spending time planning, making sure your character's in peak condition? Well, spending time planning and preparing for a difficult encounter would take much longer than just throwing yourself into the fight half a dozen times until you win. Dying is a minor inconvenience and rarely comes with any real punishment besides setting you back a couple seconds, and then at the absolute worst of cases, a few minutes. I'll go into depth on this point later, but you aren't going to play the two game modes the same. So that thought, my hardcore run would be over, is very misleading, because you very likely would not have been in that situation in the first place. The last misunderstanding I want to go over is what starting over is like, because it's not the same as starting the game for the first time. Again, another very reasonable line of thinking is that if you have to start the game over again for a character that's 20 hours, that's 20 more identical hours you will need to spend to get to where you were, which is almost never the case. If you've ever played any game twice, you'll likely understand what I mean when I talk about this. Playing a game for the first time is incredibly different than starting the game a second time. I mean, have you ever wished that you'd completely forgotten a game so that you could play it again for the first time? I know I have. If you've ever thought about playing a game again for the first time, then you understand at least a little bit why playing it again won't be identical. Take a game I covered on this channel, Kenshi. It has an intense skill leveling system with a world of deadly surprises around every corner. It might take 40 or even 50 hours to get any real progress in the game for your first time playing it. However, while some of that time is spent leveling your characters or collecting resources, in reality, it's spent learning. What happens to your playthrough when those deadly surprises aren't a surprise? Everything you gain in the first 20 hours of gameplay could be regained in a fraction of the time on a new playthrough. Not only can you gain faster, you can also avoid some deadly mistakes, putting you in an even better position than you were. Kenshi isn't the only game where knowledge of a single playthrough greatly increases the experience of subsequent playthroughs either. Take playing a colony simulator like, Amazing Cultivation Simulator, another game I covered on this channel. Well, the first 5 minutes of any playthrough has the most potential of benefits versus negatives of any other event in the game. If you try to salvage your initial playthrough every time something goes wrong, then not knowing how to maximize those 5 minutes could cause everything you do in the game to take hundreds of hours more if you would just let the playthrough fail and start it over again. The other thing is, there's no way you could have the knowledge to maximize the benefit of those first 5 minutes, so it's actually extremely beneficial to play that game as a hardcore game versus always saving and reloading, because quite literally 40 to 50 hours of progress could be gained in 4 to 5 hours with the knowledge that 40 to 50 hours of gameplay imparts on you. Knowledge isn't always the only benefit of a hardcore playthrough either. Games like Diablo 2 allow you to trade items between characters. This means even if you die and have to relevel your character, it's much easier to get where you were because the majority of your time in that game is spent gathering items. So while you likely lost your best items, you almost certainly have virtually identical replacements stored on another character. In the end, your character is still lost, but you don't go back to square one. You're still significantly better off than you were when you started. So while starting over on a character with 40 hours in hardcore is a pain in the ass, that doesn't mean that you lost those 40 hours or that it's going to cost another 40 to get back to where you were. You always have something to bring back, even if it is just knowledge. And sometimes the knowledge to avoid mistakes from one playthrough to another can be more beneficial to your overall experience than never losing that character to begin with. So no matter what the game is, your experience with the next character will not mirror the original, which is why this is the third misconception around hardcore. These are the main misunderstandings that people, especially my past self, have about playing hardcore. While clearing up these misunderstandings may help you not outright hate the idea of this game mode, I don't think clearing these misunderstandings is enough to make the majority of people play a hardcore game experience. However, I think the benefits of playing hardcore will. So why would you ever risk it? Well, sure, losing a hardcore playthrough might not be as bad as you originally thought. The benefits of playing still seem minuscule. Sure, more knowledge is nice, but why can't you just use that knowledge and have a better softcore playthrough instead? Every benefit of the last section is still in softcore, so what's the point? What possible reason could there be for playing hardcore when the only difference between hardcore and softcore is that when you die, you die? As far as I'm aware, there's never better drop rates or additional content for hardcore playthroughs. At most, there are some extra challenges that are only completed in hardcore, so why isn't it a waste of time? I wouldn't fault you if at this point you were sure it was just to prove how hardcore you are, but it's not. Playing hardcore is more than just about that sweet, incredibly profitable gamer cred. In fact, if you think about it even a little bit, you'll realize there's actually way less gamer cred in playing hardcore than you probably thought. In general, most people look at someone who plays hardcore in a bad light, including many of the people who play hardcore. The only time I've ever seen any recognizable credit to people playing hardcore is very recently. Blizzard released a new game, Diablo 4, and they offered a prize to the first 1,000 people who reached max level on hardcore in their game. While it may seem like this is a real skill check, all you have to do is see what people say about these things. No one is calling the people who got the top 1,000 amazing. No one is focusing on them. In fact, almost no one is even praising them either. Most people think the prize is lame too. I don't. I think it's fucking sweet. But generally, people have actually been making fun of someone subjecting themselves to hardcore just to get their name on the statue. So everyone who's doing it is not getting any credibility, and most of the best people in the space weren't participating in the race. And in general, the highest skilled players don't play hardcore, because in general, the highest skilled players play softcore because the purpose of hardcore runs counter to their purpose for playing the game. For example, Minecraft has hardcore, but someone who's incredibly skilled at the game might be setting up an intricate system of architecture, creating massive ecosystems. These people can often be some of the best, but dying would wipe out all of their work. So there's no reason to play it on hardcore. When Twitch streamers are playing Minecraft or any game on hardcore mode, they're doing it for content. The point of them playing is so that the viewers can laugh at them when they die, which is literally the opposite of doing it to show off their skills. No one who watches someone play a game on hardcore does so to see them win. They watch to see them get mad when they lose. So if you think hardcore game modes are about proving you're the best, generally that's not the case. Yes, some people do, and maybe to an extent, everyone who plays these modes has that little voice in the back of their head telling them to cleanse them all in righteous fire. I mean, telling them that they're proving something to themselves. Yeah, that's what I meant. But realistically, if this is the reason you play hardcore, to prove how hardcore you are, then everyone, including a majority of the hardcore community, is laughing at you. So if it's not for that lucrative gamer cred, why do people play these modes? Well, there are two main reasons. The first one, I've already touched on in a previous section, that hardcore changes the way you play the game. Just in the example I used earlier, the way you interacted with a specific mechanic, fall damage, changed from testing it out to looking it up. While that isn't the biggest change, even in this example, we can see what benefits playing hardcore can provide. And it goes back to knowledge. Fall damage is an easy mechanic to understand. And if you fall, you take damage. And if you fall from high enough, you die. That's all you really need to know. However, there is more you need to know. For example, what if falling on snow reduces fall damage? That might be cool, but so what? You might not be aware of this mechanic in a game where this knowledge wasn't crucial to moving forward and death wasn't permanent. But that knowledge might have made the game much easier to deal with if you did have it. And it's something that would have almost certainly learned in hardcore. Also, going a bit further with fall damage, there might be a spell or item that reduces or completely negates the damage you receive. In softcore, sure, you might have learned about these, but chances are you might not have. That's because, at least when I play games, I pay attention to most of the information that the game gives me. But when I have my groove down, I stop caring about new information. Because when I have everything I realistically need to complete the game, everything extra just seems like a waste of time. If I don't require this fall damage negation to continue, then I don't really think I'd have learned about it. Whereas in hardcore playthrough, you always are acutely aware of anything that may kill you and how to avoid it. You would absolutely know about these negations. Now, fall damage is one example, but there are games with extensive damage types and spell systems that give the player no reason to explore them in depth. To some of you, what I'm saying may sound like a developer problem, and maybe it is. But I think player psychology has a lot to do with exploring these systems. To show what I'm talking about, I want to talk about the opposite of permadeath for a minute and what it ends up taking away from a playthrough. Because I think the effects of playing games with the opposite of permadeath shows in a much more vivid detail the point I'm trying to make as to what permadeath brings to the table. If you've ever played a game with the invincibility cheat, you may already understand subconsciously why people love hardcore. That's because invincibility is really fucking boring. Playing a game where you can't die nullifies almost every single mechanic in the game. I think it's obvious for anyone who likes games at all that invincibility would ruin many of the games that you like to play. Fighting games, soul games, sandboxes, simulations. 90% of what makes those games fun are now irrelevant. Who needs to learn a powerful combo in a fighting game if you can't take damage? Who cares about timing in a Souls game if you never die? Even a game with no combat, like The Sims, invincibility will make the game boring. If you stop your Sims from having needs, you're effectively making them invincible. Yeah, a sim can still eat, but they're never hungry, so why cook or improve your kitchen? A lot of the Sims gameplay is about upgrading the houses so their needs are met faster, but they have no needs, so they also don't need money for upgrades. With no need of money, they have no need to work, which now gives them infinite time. But what do you need to do with that time? It just completely makes everything not worth doing, and basically every game has some form of invincibility that would similarly ruin the experience. If what I'm saying resonates with you, then you already understand one of the major draws to hardcore. While invincibility forces you to interact with the game systems less than a normal playthrough, hardcore forces you to interact with the game systems more than a normal playthrough. This means you get a deeper appreciation and understanding for the mechanics in the game, making you enjoy it in ways you never thought possible. If you enjoy a game that you're playing, then hardcore will most likely make you enjoy it more, the same way invincibility makes you enjoy it less. Remember, you probably played a game with invincibility because you really wanted to be invincible in the game and you thought it would be a lot of fun. And that thought probably was there up until you got it, and it wasn't. And I'm pretty sure that when you wanted invincibility, it wasn't clear to you that having it would ruin the experience. The reason it ruins the experience is because you as a human being will try not to waste your time. In fact, that's likely why you have always told yourself you don't want to play hardcore, because if you die, you're just wasting your time. But if that logic transferred as in hardcore was a waste of time, then invincibility wouldn't be as bad as it is. Invincibility is more of a waste of time than dying in hardcore, which leads me to the second huge benefit to hardcore. The second reason people play hardcore is because a hardcore playthrough matters more. I know what that sounds like, all right? You're thinking, I knew it, Angel, I knew it. You were just doing it for the gamer cred. But hold your horses. This is a tough one, and it's the last point for a reason. And that's because it's the hardest to convey to someone who hasn't played hardcore before, but I'm going to do my best. When I say it matters more, I'm saying that because it actually does. And I'm going to try and prove it to you. It's hard to describe exactly what I mean, but I'll use a game I've played extensively on hardcore and softcore to explain, Diablo 2. Here I have two of the same class, one on softcore, one on hardcore. The hardcore one has 2 Stones of Jordan, 2 spirits, and he's working on an enigma. And if that means literally nothing to you, what I'm saying is my hardcore character is 1 fucking step away from being stacked, all right? However, so is my softcore character, but I haven't really played him since I started my hardcore one. You can see I have another pair of characters where I have a softcore and a hardcore one. That's because in this game, and most games, you can't trade between hardcore and softcore characters, so everything I've done on softcore had to be redone in hardcore. Now that sounds like a waste of time, doesn't it? Why would I do it all over again if I don't have to? That's a really good question. You're not dumb or wrong for thinking that hardcore might be a waste of time. It's just, the reason is what I said, hardcore matters more. Let's take these 2 items for example. They are identical, but one is more important than the other. Now, see, you may think that there's something different about them because I said that, but there isn't. The only difference between them is that one is on softcore and one is on hardcore. So while these items are literally the same in every conceivable way, they are fundamentally different because one is on hardcore and one is on softcore. They give identical stats, they have identical drop rates, you get them from the same places, they equip to the same slots, they are the same in every measurable way, but they don't do the same thing. While both items make both characters stronger in the exact same metrics, only one of them is standing between a character and his deletion. While both items give you stats, one of those items' stats are slightly helpful, while the other one can mean the difference between life and death. Between these 2 items, while both are literally the same, the one on hardcore matters more because it does more. It's not just items either. As you play through a softcore game, there will be encounters that are annoying because they kill you often. On hardcore, these exact same encounters can be exhilarating. I honestly don't remember 99% of the deaths I've had on softcore. On hardcore though, I remembered not only every single death, but I also remember each and every time my health dropped below 25%, because each and every time my heart was pounding, and when I survived these encounters, my adrenaline was pumping. Now, this is gonna sound cheesy as hell, but there's a good chance hardcore even saved my life. That's because hardcore teaches you to remain calm when things are going insane. So when you're close to dying in hardcore, you have to navigate the situation calmly, or else you're gonna lose your character. Well, less than 2 weeks ago, I was driving my car down the road and it started to hydroplane. And it started to swerve across 3 lanes of the freeway. As I was swerving across these 3 lanes of traffic, I thought I was dead. This isn't an exaggeration for this video. My wife was in the car and she agreed afterwards. She thought it was over and we were gonna die. The car was out of control. I had to swerve back and forth across 3 lanes of traffic for 4 separate turns before I was able to get it back under control. It was scary. It was insane, and I was completely calm the entire time. Many thoughts ran through my head. Are there any cars I'm gonna hit? I checked my rearview mirror and I saw that the car behind me noticed me going out of control and hit their brakes. Good. What speed are we going? 65? That's too fast to hit the barrier. We'd be pulverized. So hitting it isn't an option. Each turn is sending the car more out of control. I don't think I can recover from this with how it's happening right now. What is it they say? Don't brake? Okay, I let off the brake. What else? Turn into the drift. Let me tell you something, viewer. The scariest decision I've ever made in my entire life was after the 4th turn. I was literally shaking as I wrote this, and I'm a little broken up as I'm talking about it. My chest is tight, and I'm a bit lightheaded thinking about it. But after the 4th turn inward, instead of turning the wheel the opposite direction like I had been in order to avoid ramming into the barrier, I kept the wheels pointed in the direction of the barrier. And the traction came back and I regained control of the car. I survived, obviously. Not just that though. My car came out unscathed. My wife is alive, unharmed. My dog is a little scared of the car now. But why am I telling you this? Because the next time I got on Diablo 4, I told you it's going to be corny, my character almost died in game again, and I realized that I was using the same skill I had used that day. It's not a feeling I've ever gotten from playing softcore, and for some reason, playing hardcore just taps into that part of my brain. I'm thankful to be alive right now. And while far from a one-to-one comparison, I feel that after surviving a hardcore encounter that was close, it's hard to play softcore because it's missing that edge, that weight to every action, the importance of every item you get. It's not just the good times that are more interesting either, it's the bad times too. I was participating in the Diablo 4 race and I died several times. Words cannot describe the horror or the change in emotion you get when your character dies in front of you. It's soul crushing, it's absolutely heart-wrenching, it's frustrating, and so much more. But it's not over. You get a second chance at life. You can start over, and while it's not always the best thing ever, it helps you appreciate the game more if you choose to persevere. You don't have to like hardcore games to feel this way either. I played with several friends of mine recently on hardcore in Diablo 2. I've had friends lose characters with good gear and lots of hours into them, and when that happens, the tension is palpable. The person it happens to is devastated, and the rest of us are just glad we're alive. The friend of ours that died didn't want to play hardcore either, but they wanted to play with us, so they decided they'd do it. When it happened, I honestly thought that losing his character was going to make him quit, and it did. He played softcore for a while, and we played with him, but he couldn't stomach it anymore. It just didn't hit as hard, so he abandoned his softcore character to play with our hardcore ones again. However, like I said, it wasn't over for him. The rest of us all had high-level characters with lots of gear, and he still had many of his best items in his stash. It took us less than a day to get him back to where it took him a week to get originally. There's just something about hardcore that makes everything in the game just a little bit better. However, while I think most people would like hardcore if they gave it a chance, that doesn't mean everyone should play it. There are many reasons you shouldn't play hardcore as well. I've been talking up a storm about how good hardcore is, but the cold, hard reality is that, like everything, it's not for everyone. And I think if you're still on the fence, it might help for me to tell you why you shouldn't play hardcore. It might seem like telling you why you shouldn't play is counter to what I'm doing here today, which is trying to get people to play hardcore that haven't. In reality, that's not my goal. My goal isn't to get people to play hardcore. It's to help people have as much fun as they can. I want everyone who tries hardcore mode after watching this video to have the time of their lives and really consider playing hardcore mode more often. And to do that, you shouldn't just know when to play hardcore. You should really know when not to. The first reason you shouldn't play a hardcore game is that you haven't played the game before at all. While I think hardcore really adds to the experience of any game, playing hardcore, especially the first time you've ever played a game, is going to be frustrating. Trust me, I know. I played Diablo 4 hardcore before playing softcore, and it fucking sucks. I had to lose many characters to very easily avoidable issues that I had to die to in order to learn. I think if you always love playing hardcore mode, then it's fine to play hardcore if you haven't played it softcore before, but realistically, there's a lot of dumb ways you can die in any game, and dying to a simple misunderstanding is going to completely ruin the experience if you're not a veteran. Sometimes it can be funny, but in general, it's just bad. This leads into the next reason, which is you shouldn't play hardcore if you don't like the game. While I said hardcore makes the experience that much better, it really just amplifies whatever you're already feeling. So if you're having a good time, it'll make it even better. On the flip side of this is that if you're having a bad time, it's gonna make it that much worse because you're gonna have to interact with the systems you don't like more than you already do. Remember what I said earlier about invincibility? Well, there are probably those of you that have done invincibility in a game and actually had a better time, but that's because you likely didn't enjoy the game much in the first place. At least you didn't enjoy the mechanic invincibility helped you ignore. So while a game you hate might be even worse with hardcore, it might be better with invincibility, showing even more how hardcore affects the experience. There are actually exceptions to this, where there are games I played that restarting when I died would have made the entire game more enjoyable overall. I would say that is definitely the exception. You're better off just moving on from a game that leaves a bad taste in your mouth, rather than trying to improve the experience with a hardcore playthrough. The next reason to avoid hardcore is that the game doesn't have any kind of hardcore community. While if you've never really played hardcore on a game before, I doubt this would ever really matter to you. There are some games that just don't do well with hardcore. Playing Super Meat Boy on hardcore would be literally a fucking nightmare. Also, while you may have seen someone play through Elden Ring without dying, there's a reason there isn't a strong hardcore Elden Ring community. The next reason might sound harsh, but it's important. Don't play hardcore if you're doing it to prove how good you are at the game. If you play hardcore for this reason, you're probably going to have the worst time playing the game out of anyone. You're either a god at the game or you aren't. Playing hardcore isn't going to prove what you already know. It's only going to cause you immense frustration when you die. There are a number of reasons someone can lose a hardcore playthrough that has nothing to do with skill, and that will infuriate you to no end if this is why you're playing hardcore. Yes, we know you didn't die because of skill. No, we don't care. Yes, it is unfair, but a death is a death. Just as an example, I was playing Diablo 2 during a DDoS attack on Blizzard, and my game DC'd and I lost a high-level, decently geared character. I was sad, it sucked, but it was part of the experience. I re-leveled my character and kept on trucking. The Diablo 4 race had their Discord filled with people who died to DCs in hardcore, because what the race did is it brought a huge amount of people in the game playing hardcore that would have never done so beforehand. And not only were they doing it to prove how good they were, and not only were they upset that they died, they always had an excuse about how their death wasn't their fault. And it's always so annoying to see someone trying to get pity on a DC for like 2 fucking hours, because that's why they played in the first place, for recognition about how good they are. If you pick up hardcore to prove something to everyone, then you're just gonna end up infuriated, because then dying proves to yourself that you were bad, when it shouldn't. It's about learning. Playing hardcore isn't about skill, it's about the experience. It's not that you're bad if you die, and you're not any better because it was a DC instead of a mistake. It's just a way of playing. Which brings me to my final reason why you shouldn't play hardcore, and that's because you really don't want to. Listen, I'm not here to make people play this game mode against their will. I truly feel like there's something a lot of people are missing by not playing it, but it's not specifically something that everyone is missing. I made this video for the specific purpose of helping convince my past self to play hardcore, because I thought it would be a terrible experience, and I was wrong. I would have had so many more fun experiences in my life if I had known. While I can never show this video to a younger Angel, my hope is that one of you out there who's never really liked the idea of hardcore tries it out and ends up liking it more than you ever thought possible. If you think that it's literally impossible to enjoy this game mode, then chances are you're right. You know yourself better than I ever could. And if you say it's a bad idea, I trust you on that. However, if any of the reasons I pointed out to you sound good, and you avoid all the reasons I said you shouldn't play hardcore, I think you're gonna have a great time. If I've helped convince you, or you love playing hardcore game modes, please let me know down in the comments below. I expect this video to do absolutely abysmally, so any likes or comments that helps me gain the favor of the almighty algorithm are appreciated. And besides that, I'll let you in on a little secret. I really like reading your comments and seeing the likes on my video go up. Finally, I want to thank my first patrons, John Templeton and Editorial Entertainment. If you didn't know, I'm on Patreon, where you can see me post at least twice every month about the behind the scenes procrastinating I'm doing for this channel. And trust me, there's a lot of it. And you can also get a shout out here at the end of my videos for supporting me. Anyways, I have a lot of shit to do for my next couple videos. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.